fundamental programming abstractions like variables, operators, if-else statements, for and while loops, as well as loop control statements. So as we have learned in the previous session, the syntax differences are the only thing that we need to learn when we are learning a completely new programming languages. And within like less than an hour of time, we were able to learn a lot of these fundamental abstractions in Java as well, right? So now let's get into today's session. So in today's session, we will see what is the syntax difference in Python and Java with respect to methods as well as with respect to classes. And we'll also look into what are the additional data types that are present in Java. There are two types of data types, primitive data types as well as non-primitive data types in Java, which we'll learn in today's session. And we'll also look into some of the best practices that we need to follow in case of Java. Okay. So let's look into what is the syntax difference in terms of Python as well as Java with respect to classes. One difference that we already have understood is whenever we want to declare or enclose a block of code, in case of Java, we would be using flower braces or curly braces to enclose a block of code. Okay, so that is one difference between both Java as well as Python. One example of a class in case of both Python as well as in case of Java. So here you can see we have declared or defined a class rectangle, and there is a constructor method. In case of Python, we have declared the constructor method using define underscore underscore init, and we have passed few arguments to the constructor, and there within the constructor we are assigning few values to the class variables in case of Python. And we have, for the same thing, we have a piece of Java code. Now let's get into step by step to see or understand the differences in terms of defining a class in Python versus Java. Okay. So in case of Java, whenever you want to use any variable within the class, you need to declare them first. Okay. So whenever you want to use any variables within a class, you need to declare them first in case of Java. Okay. So if you look at the piece of code in Python, so here we have two class variables that we are using, width and height. So whenever you want to use them in the class in case of Java, you need to declare them first. So that's the reason why we have declared variables int width and int height towards the starting of the class. So whenever we are planning to use these class variables within the class, then we need to declare them first. And width or height are the two variables which we are going to use in this particular class. And in Java, we need to also declare the type of the variables before we are going to use them. In this particular case, we are going to use integers for width as well as height. So we have declared the variables as int space width and int space height. So we have declared two variables, width and height. Both of them are of integer data types. So this is one difference between Python and Java. Whenever you are planning to use any variables within the class, you need to declare them first. And whenever you're declaring variables, you need to also declare the type of the variables as well in case of Java. This is one difference between Python and Java. And the second difference is with the constructor. So as you already know, in Python also we have already seen constructor method. So in Python we define constructor method using define underscore underscore init underscore underscore. So this is what we have used to define a constructor method in case of Python. Whereas in case of Java, constructed method is a very special type of method, and the name of the method is same as the class name in itself. Okay, so in Java, constructed method is a special type of method, and the name of the method is the same as the class name itself. Okay, so here we have the class name as rectangle. So the constructed method name in Java is also rectangle, because the class, whenever you are defining a method in case of Java, you also, whenever you are passing few arguments to that particular method, you also need to declare the type of the arguments in case of Java. Okay, here as you can see, for the constructor method, we are passing two arguments, width as well as height. So whenever you are passing few arguments to it, you need to declare the type of the arguments. So in this case of width and height, we want to declare them as integer type. So we have given int space width comma int space height. Okay, so whereas in case of Python, we were also passing one other argument called self. To access the instance of the particular class, we used to use self, and we used to pass it as part of the constructor method. Whereas in case of Java, you need not pass the self or instance of the class to this constructor method. Okay, so in case of Java, you need to pass arguments for the constructor method, and whenever you are passing arguments, you need to declare the type of those arguments as well, and there is no need of passing the instance of the class to the constructor method in case of Java. Okay, this is another difference. And the last difference is that, so in Python, to access the class instance, we use self, and whereas in case of Java, we use this keyword to access the instance of that particular class. Okay, so these are the differences in terms of how you define a class in case of Python and how you define a class in case of Java. Okay, and to use or to create an instance of a particular class in case of Java, we'll be using a new keyword is used to create an instance of a class. So as you can see, new followed by class name, and you're passing arguments to the constructor method. and whatever the instance gets returned after the creation of new instance class, we need to store it in a variable. And whenever you want to store a particular value in a variable, we have already learned that in Java you need to declare the type of that particular variable. Okay, so in this case the type of the variable is nothing but the class name itself. Okay, so here we are using rectangle class, and we are creating an instance of rectangle class. So the variable type should also be again the class name itself. Okay, so in this case rectangle is the class, so we have declared the type of the variable as rectangle itself. Okay, now let's go to the code playground, and whatever we have learned with respect to class in Java, we'll try and implement it in the code playground. Okay, so we have come to the code playground. Okay, so now let's create class. Okay, class which is same across both Python and Java. Okay, rectangle. Okay, now followed by, for the block of code, we'll use flower braces or curly braces. Okay, right. So whenever we want to use particular variables in a class, we need to declare them first in case of Java. Here we want to use two variables, width and height, and both of them are of the type integer data type. So we'll declare int width semicolon, int height semicolon. Okay. So now we have declared two variables, width and height, which are class variables which will be used. Now let's write constructor method. So in case of Java, the constructor method name should be the same as the class name itself. So as you can see, the class name is rectangle. So the constructor method name should also be rectangle. Okay, it's a special type of method in case of Java. Okay, now we need to pass the arguments for it. So here for the constructor class, we are passing two arguments, width as well as height. So whenever we are passing arguments to a method in case of Java, we need to declare the type of these arguments as well. So here we are passing int width, okay, comma int height. So again, for enclosing the block of code, we use flower braces or curly braces. And now we need to assign those values to the class variables. Okay. So this dot width equal to width, this dot height equal to height. Okay, so now we have created a class rectangle with two variables, class variables width and height, where we have declared the type of them, and then we have declared the constructor method where we have passed arguments width and height, and we have also declared the type of them. And within the constructor method, so we have used this keyword to access the instance and assign values to the class variables from the arguments that were passed. Okay, now let's get to the main method. Okay, so here, okay, so now we'll create an instance of this class. We'll clear out the code that exists here. Okay. So now rectangle space rect is the variable. Okay. New rectangle of, okay, we'll give width as 10, height as 20. Okay. So here you can see that we are using new keyword to create a new instance of a class, and we have followed by class name and arguments for the constructor method, and whatever the class instance that will be returned, so we need to store it in a variable. Okay, and for that variable we need to declare the type of that variable. In this case, the type of the variable is nothing but the class in itself. Okay, now we will access, okay, system dot out dot println of, okay, rectangle dot, okay, width, and we'll also print rectangle dot height. Okay, so we will run this code and we'll see the output. Okay, let's once again look into. Okay, so we have created a class rectangle, and we have declared variables width as well as height, and then we have declared the constructor method. So it's a constructor method is a special type of method in case of Java, where we have passed arguments width as well as height. Okay, and here we used this keyword to access the instance of the class in case of Java, and we have assigned values width and height. Okay, and in main method, here we have created a new instance of class using the new keyword followed by the class name, and we have passed the arguments to the constructor, and whatever the value that is written, we'll need to store it in a variable, and that variable type needs to be declared upfront. So in this case, the type is nothing but the class name itself, and then we try to access the class variables from the instance or instance object that got created, and we have printed the values of width as well as height. And as you can see, the output have we have seen, like, whatever width that has been passed 10, we can see the output, and we have passed 20 as height, and we can see the same in cases of the output. Okay, so we have learned how to create a class in case of Java. Okay, now let's get into methods. Okay, so in case of Python, whenever we want to define a method, we use def keyword to define a method, followed by the method name. And if at all you want to pass any arguments, then you enclose them in round braces, and followed by that you have a block of code which you will enclose with the indentation. Whereas in case of Java, there is no separate keyword for defining a method. Okay, so but before writing a method name, we need to declare the type of value, return value of that particular method. Okay, so we need to declare the return type of that particular method. Okay, followed by method name, and And again, similar to case of Python, if you want to declare any arguments that are going to be passed to that particular method, then you need to enclose them in the round braces, okay, followed by the block of code which is enclosed in the flower brace or curly braces. Okay, now let's look at into through an example. Okay, so here we have get name method. In case of Python, we have used def keyword to declare a method name, and followed by we have a block of code where we have a person variable and where we have assigned string value, and we are returning the string value for that particular method. Okay, so because Python is a dynamically typed language, you need not declare any return type of that particular method. Whereas in case of Java, you need to declare the return type of that particular method. So in this case, we are returning person, which is a string data type. So we need to have the return type as string, followed by method name, which is get underscore name of, because we are not passing any arguments. So the round braces will not have any arguments within it. And then we have flower braces or curly braces to enclose the block of code. And there we have string person equal to string name followed by semicolon. And we are returning the person variable as the return for this particular method. Okay. So in Java, because it is a statically typed language, we need to declare the type of the value that is being returned by that particular method. Okay. So we'll also try it in the code playground. So we'll create a new method in the class, so which is called as get underscore width of. And because in Java is a statically typed language, we need to declare the type of the return value of that particular method. So in this case, we are going to return this dot width, and width is of integer data type. So we'll declare the method as integer int space method name followed by block of code which is enclosed in the flower braces or curly braces. And when we are trying to access the method, we can just write rect dot get underscore width of. So whatever is the method name that we have used in case of the class, so we'll call it using the same method name. Okay, we'll go to the code playground, modify it, and we'll test it out. Okay. So here we'll declare a new method. Okay. So before declaring a method, we need to write the return type of it. So here we are planning to return an integer value. So int space get underscore, okay, width of, followed by block of code. Okay. We'll return this dot width. Okay. So here width is of integer data type. So we are returning the same integer value. Okay. Now here we can call rectangle dot get underscore width of. Okay. So now we can run this code and we can see the output. So the output shouldn't change because all we are trying to do is, instead of directly accessing the variable width, we have written a method get underscore width of, through which we are returning the same value, return this dot width of. So effectively the output should not change. And as you can see, so the output remains the same. It's just that instead of directly accessing the class variable, we have used a method to kind of get the value for it. Now we can also similarly write get height of int space get underscore height of, okay, return this dot height. Okay. And here also, instead of rectangle dot height, we can call get underscore height of. Okay. And we can run the code and we'll see that it's the same output which was printed earlier. Again, it is going to come. Okay. Right. So we have seen, we have also written get underscore height method, and we have also played around with it in the code playground. Okay. And you must have already gotten this out. What if a method doesn't return any value? Okay, what should be the return type for that particular method? Okay, so in Java, whenever you are writing a method which doesn't return anything, then you need to use the return type as void, void. Okay, so in Java, we use the void keyword to indicate that a method doesn't return any value. Okay, as you can see here, assume we are writing a print message as a method where we are not passing any arguments, and we are just printing hello world. Okay, so this method doesn't return any value. So for the return type, we will use void as the keyword. Okay. So what we can also do is we can write a method called as print underscore area. All it does is nothing but just print the area of that particular rectangle. Okay. So as you can see, we have used void keyword for the print underscore area method, because print underscore area method doesn't return any value. Okay. So we have used void followed by method name, and in the block of code we have written system.out.println of this dot width into this dot height. Okay. So area of rectangle is nothing but width into height. So we have used that, and the same method we have called it in the main method. Okay, let's try it out in the code playground. Okay, now first write the method. Okay, void print underscore area of. Okay, we have used void because we are not going to return any value from this method. Okay, now system dot out dot println of this dot width multiplied by this dot height. Okay, and in this main method we'll call, okay, rect dot, okay, print underscore area of. Let's run this code and see the output. Okay, so as you can see, the output came out as 210 multiplied by 20, which is 200. Okay, so here one thing that we need to learn is whenever we have a method which doesn't return any value, then we need to declare the return type as void. It's a special keyword which is used in Java. Okay, and whenever we are passing arguments, like similar to the way we have seen for constructor method, so whenever we are passing an arguments to a particular method, we need to declare the type of those arguments in Java. Okay, so as you can see, for print underscore message method, so there we are passing an argument message, so we need to declare the type of the argument that is being passed. In this particular case, we are passing a string data type, so we need to declare that the message argument is of string data type. Whereas in case of add method, as you can see, so we are passing two arguments a comma b. So where a and b, both of them are integers which are being passed. So we need to declare them type of those arguments as integers, int a comma int b. And we are returning a plus b. Again, a plus b is also an integer value. So we need to declare the return type as int. Okay. So in case of Java, whenever you are passing arguments to a particular method, you need to declare the type of those arguments as well. Okay. Right. Now let's get to data types in case of Java. So Java has various types of data types, and they can be broadly categorized into two types. One is primitive data type and other is non-primitive data types. Let's look into what each of these types are. Okay. So in case of Java, the primitive data types are nothing but which are already predefined and built into the language itself. So they are something like Boolean, char, byte, short, int, long, float, and double. We'll look into what each of these data types mean. Some of them are you are already familiar with, and some of them might be pretty new for you. Okay. So the primitive data types like byte. So whenever you declare a particular variable as byte data type, then the range of possible values that you can store in the particular value variable are minus 128 to 127. So if you declare a variable as byte data type, so the minimum value that you can store is minus 128, and the maximum value that you can store is 127. Similarly, if you declare a variable as short data type, then the minimum value that you can store is minus 32,768, and the maximum value that you can store is 32,767. Similarly, whenever you declare a variable as int data type, it is also called as large integer. And as you can see, there is a pretty large values, the minimum and maximum that you can store. And you also have long as a data type. So whenever you declare a variable as long data type, that means you can store very large integer values, as the name suggests. And as you can see, the range of possible values is also pretty huge. Okay. So whenever you want to store only a small value, okay, whenever you want to store only a small integer, then you use the byte keyword. Okay. And whenever you want to store moderate value, then you use short keyword to declare the particular variable. And whenever you want to store large integer values, then you use int. And whenever you want to store very large integer values, then you use the long keyword. Okay. And when it comes to decimal values, you have two types, float and double, which we will see as we proceed further in the session. And for Boolean values, which is either true or false, so we'll use Boolean data type. And in Java, we also have something called as char data type. Whenever we just want to store only a single character, then we use this char data type. Okay, so we'll see all of it in action as well as we proceed further into the session. Okay, so now let's look into this particular Java code. Okay, so here we have taken a variable price and we have declared it as short. So that is a moderate integer value. Okay. So here we are assigning a value of 20,000, and if we print out the value, it shows as 20,000. Assume if we assign 50,000 as a value to variable price, which is declared as short data type, then you will see this error. Okay. So it says that error is incompatible types, possible lossy conversion from integer to short. Okay. So we'll see why this error has been thrown out. Okay. As we have already seen, short means we have to store only moderate size of integer. The maximum value that you can store is 32,767, and the minimum value that you can store is minus 32,768. And in this particular case, we try to assign value 50,000. So price can only store values between minus 32,768 to 32,767. If you are trying to assign value which is out of the range, then you will see such type of errors in case of Java. Okay. And in case of decimal values, assume if you want to store 5.6 decimal value in variable height. Okay, so you can declare the type of that particular variable as double data type, because in case of Java, by default, whenever you assign a decimal value, it is considered as a data type of double. Okay, so whenever we are writing just 5.6 or any decimal value, by default in Java, it is considered as data type double. So we have declared the type of the variable height as double. Assume if we try to assign a decimal value to a height variable which is declared as float data type, again you would see an error in case of Java. Okay, So again, it says that possible lossy conversion from double to float. Okay. So in case of Java, whenever you declare a decimal data type, decimal value, by default, it will be considered as a double data type. And if you are trying to assign it to a float data type, integer of a variable of float data type, then this sort of errors can be seen. Okay. So to avoid this, if you want to have this decimal value to be defined or declared as float, then we need to add suffix f towards the end of the decimal value. So in this case, 5.6 is the decimal value. By default, it will be considered as double. But if you want to define it as a float value, then you need to add the suffix f to the end. 5.6 f means 5.6 float value. Then you can assign the value to a variable which is declared as float data type. Okay. So this is also something that you need to remember when you're writing programs in Java. Okay. And next we have learned about char data type. So we have also understood that whenever we want to store a single character, then we can use char data type in case of Java. So here assume we want to store a grade. Okay, assume the grade value is A. Okay, so if we want to store a single character, then we will use char data type. So here grade variable is declared as char data type. That means we are saying that grade variable can store a single character, and whenever we are creating a value, a single character, then we need to enclose it in single quotes. Okay, so only we need to, whenever we are trying to assign a value to a variable of char data type, then we need to use single quotes to create a value of single character. Okay, so assume if you use double quotes, okay, so then you will see such kind of errors where it says that incompatible types string cannot be converted to char. Okay, so in case of Java, if you are using double quotes, it means you are creating a string value. If you are using single quotes, it means you are creating a character value. Okay, so whenever you are using double quotes, it means in Java you are creating a string value, and a string value cannot be assigned to a variable which is declared as character. Okay, so this is also something that you need to remember. Okay, now let's get to non-primitive data types. So in these non-primitive data types are generally complex data structures like arrays and objects. We'll learn more about them as well as we proceed further into the session. For now, we'll look into three types of non-primitive data types: string, array, and class. Okay. So as we have already been using string keyword, so again it is called as non-primitive data type in case of Java. So whenever you want to create a string value, you use double quotes, and whatever is enclosed within this double quotes is considered as a string. And whenever you want to store a string value in a particular variable, you need to declare the type of that particular variable as string data type. Okay. And in case of Python, you can either use a single quote or double quote to create a string value. Whereas in case of Java, you can only use double quotes to create a string value, because we have already seen that if you are using single quotes, that means you are trying to create a character, single character. Okay. And so as you can see, if we try to create a string value using single quotes, again, it will throw out an error in case of Java. Okay. So let's also look into the difference between string as well as character in case of Java. Okay. So in case of Java, if you are using quotes, that means you are creating a single character. Okay. So if you use single quotes and if you try to give a word and enclose a word in it, then it will throw out as an error. And whenever you are using double quotes, even if you have single character in it, it will be considered as string but not character. Okay, so you need to understand these differences, and maybe you can also try experimenting or exploring it in the code playground. Okay, so you can try out different variations: single quotes, double quotes, string, character, and play around with yourself and see what the output or the error that is being displayed in case of Java. Okay, now let's look into another non-primitive data types, which is array. So in Java, we have some data type called as array, which is non-primitive data type, and you can think of it to be something similar to lists in case of Python. While there are differences between lists as well as arrays between Java and Python, but for time being, you can assume arrays to be something similar to lists, but not exactly the same, because there are multiple differences between the both. So one of the difference between lists and arrays in Java is that in an array, all the elements should be of same data type. Whereas in case of Python, in a particular list, each element can be of different data type. But whereas in case of Java, all elements in an array should be of same data type. So if you can see this example, so here we have a declared an array. So to declare an array of particular data type, so you need to have the data type name followed by the square braces. So whenever you declare a variable, whenever you want to declare a variable to be of an array of particular data type, then you need to have the data type name followed by square braces. That means you are in this particular case, you are saying you are creating an integer array. So int is the data type, and followed by square braces mentions that you are creating an array. Int array. Okay, so you are saying integer array. Int followed by that square braces means you are creating an array. Okay, so and you are saying that num underscore sequence is a variable of type integer array. Okay, and towards the right, as you can see, you are assigning a value to it. Okay, so in this particular case, as you can see, you have assigned values in the array as 1 2 3 4. Okay, so all the values in that particular, or all the elements in that particular uh, array should be of the same data type. In this particular case, all of them are integers. That's the reason you have declared the variable as integer array. Okay, and one other difference between lists in Python as well as arrays in Java is that in case of lists in Python, you can either add elements or you can also remove the elements. Okay, that means you can change the size of the list. But whereas in case of arrays in Java, the size is fixed. So once you create an array of a particular size, you cannot increase the size or you cannot decrease the size in case of Java. Okay, so let's try to look at it through an example code. Okay, so here we have created an integer array with name num underscore seq, and to create an array of size, so here we are using flower braces, and within that we have declared some integers 1 2 3 4. Okay, that means we are creating an integer array of size 4 with values 1 2 3 4. Okay, and followed by that we have a for each loop again, where we are printing each of the elements in that particular array. Okay, so we'll try and try it in the code playground. Okay, so we'll clean up the existing code. Okay, so it has printed 1 2 3 4, which is as expected. Okay, so if we want to create a float array, then you need to assign float values in, you need to have all the elements as float data type. So as you can see, 1.0f, 2.0f, 3.0f, and 4.0f. Okay, and all the elements in that particular array should be of the float data type. Okay, if you try to kind of declare an integer array, and if you're trying to have integer values as well as float values within it, then you will see error which says that incompatible types. Okay, so whenever you are creating an array, all the elements should be of the same data type. In this case, you are creating an array of integer array, so all the elements in that particular array should be integers. Okay, and in case of Java arrays, the size of it is fixed. So once you create an array of a particular size, you cannot increase the size or you cannot decrease the size of that particular array. Whereas in case of Python list, you can either extend the size of it or decrease the size of it. Okay, and in case of Java, there is one other method through which you can also create an array. Okay, so instead of trying to assign values to the array in the first place, without doing that, what we can do is we can just create an array of a particular size, and later on we can also initialize values for that particular array. As you can see, so we have created an integer array. Int square braces means integer array with variable name num underscore sequence, and to the right we are mentioning that we want to create an array, integer array of size 4, and assign it to num underscore sequence. So new to the integer array. So we are saying 0th index, we want to have value 1. In index 1, we want to have value 2. In index 2, we want to have value 3. In index 3, we want to have value 4. Okay. So again, we'll try it out in the code playground. Okay. So we want to declare an integer array of with variable name num underscore sequence, but we want to assign a integer array of 4, size 4. So int of 4. Okay. Now we can keep assigning values to it, num underscore sequence. Okay, to assign value to element index at index 0. So we are now will print system dot out dot print. Okay, num underscore sequence of will print value at index 2, okay, as well as will print value at index 3 as well. Okay, now let's run the code and see the output. Okay, so the output should be 3 4. Okay, as you can see, we got the output as expected. Okay, so we have assigned values to it, and we have also printed values which are stored in that particular array. Okay, now let's get to another non-primitive data type, which is class. Okay, so as we have already seen how to declare a class in case of Java, so we have declared a class with name rectangle, and we have also created class variables, and we have created a constructor, and we have also written few methods in it as well. Okay, right. So one of the best practice, we'll also see what is one of the best practice that needs to be followed in case of Java. Okay, so whenever we are declaring a variable, so usually in Java the convention followed is using camel case. So assume if you want to declare a variable with name current speed, so we will use camel case notation to declare the variable name. Similarly, for the method names also, camel case notation is followed. Whereas for the class names, it's usually the Pascal case notation, which is, or the convention which is followed. Assume we want to have a class name with name sports car. Okay, so then we will have sports car, S and C being capital, which is the Pascal case convention. Okay, and in Java, while indentations are not mandatory, but it is a good practice to follow indentations because it will make our code even more readable. Okay, And we coming from Python background, we are already habituated to using indentation. It's just that we need to continue, keep following the practice. Okay. So in this session, we have seen what's the syntax difference between Python